Well, still no updates in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals case challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. And if you look at the docket, it's, a long docket. This case started, at least in the appeals court, in May. All right, May 1st. You had the docket fee being paid, and that pretty much opened it up. All the way throughout May, you had a bunch of different types of filings and notes and orders and so on. And then the most recent thing, as we've talked about, is on the 14th of this month, where you had some filings in response to the plaintiffs in this case, ultimately saying that, hey, Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, look at this case out of Hawaii concerning butterfly knives. And the Hawaii courts essentially said that butterfly knife bans are unconstitutional, but we'll see what happens with that. Still no update on that Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals case. It's not the only case that we've got our eyes on. You've also got a case concerning the measure that Governor J.B. Pritzker signed allowing for lawsuits against the firearms industry, either for how they advertise to children or for what the state constitutes illegal paramilitary or militia activity, or if somebody alleges that the firearms industry has made the public less safe, then they can file a lawsuit. That law still stands because you haven't had any actual court order to the contrary. But if you look at this case out of the Southern District of Illinois, we've talked about this a couple of different ways, including when the case was filed and all the plaintiffs, including the National Shooting Sports Foundation. But then the original, as we talked about, the original judge assigned was Judge Mark Beatty, and that was on the 15th of this month. A little bit later on, you've got the complaint being filed, and you've got also a different judge being assigned. So Beatty was removed, and you had federal Judge Stephen McGlynn, who took over the case. But then later on, you had the state essentially look to have that reversed, and that is now the case. It went from Beatty to McGlynn, and now it's back to Beatty. All right, so the motion for reconsideration, Judge Stephen McGlynn is no longer assigned. Case is transferred back to Magistrate Judge Mark A. Beatty. Well, the most recent is yesterday. There was a docket entry. Essentially, I'll read this to you. It's a notice of assignment to a U.S. magistrate judge. This case has now been transferred back to United States Magistrate Judge Mark Beatty. The order dated August 23rd, docket number 18. The parties are advised that their consent is required if the assigned magistrate is to conduct all full future proceedings in this case, including trial and final entry of judgment pursuant to federal rules. Each party will require to file a notice and consent to proceed before a magistrate judge jurisdiction from indicating consent or non-consent to the jurisdiction of the assigned magistrate judge. If all parties do not consent to the magistrate judge's jurisdiction, this case will be randomly assigned to a district judge for all further proceedings, and the parties cannot later consent or reassignment request of the case to a magistrate judge. The parties are further advised that they are free to withhold consent without adverse substantive consequences. So essentially, I guess it's going to come down to if these plaintiffs in the defense of the state are going to consent to this kind of volleying back and forth of judges. Again, when this case challenging the state's law allowing for the firearms industry to be sued in Illinois, which also includes allowing for out-of-state firearms industry individuals or companies being sued by Illinois, then you had a judge assigned. Steve McGlynn takes the case, and then it goes back to the first judge assigned. Now you've got the motion that's essentially saying, hey, you got to have the plaintiffs either consent, you got to have the defense consent. If not, then there will be a random assignment. So we'll watch that closely. But that's not the only thing that we're watching here, of course. Another case brought by Thomas Magg. This is Myers v. Kelly. And we've talked about this. It was filed in Madison County in state court, but then it was transferred to federal court in the Southern District of Illinois. And we've got an update here as well, where on the 28th, yesterday, a motion for extension. So essentially, state police are again requesting an extension of when they have to file their response. So second motion for extension of time to file answer by Brendan Kelly. That was yesterday in that case. And this is a case from Thomas Mag that challenges the state's FOID card. So count one challenges the FOID requirement, and it deals with an individual, Gary Myers, who I believe, if I understand and remember the facts, had a prior cannabis conviction, and he was prevented from getting his FOID card years later. An appeals court elsewhere in federal court across the country determined that nonviolent cannabis users do have a Second Amendment right. So Thomas Mag is using that argument to try to force the issue here in Illinois. But the second count of Mag's case that was originally filed in Madison County challenges the state law that Governor Pritzker signed that only allows for state-level challenges against state laws based on constitutional grounds to be filed in Sangamon or Cook County. So again, only in Sangamon or Cook County, as it stands right now, can individuals file a lawsuit challenging state law on constitutional grounds in state court. But again, this was filed in Madison County, and then the states moved the case from state court to federal court, so now we've got the case in the Southern District of Illinois. But those aren't the only updates from this particular case. Of course, you had one request from the state police to extend the time for their answer to the lawsuit, but you had a similar one with the granting of the first extension to file, and that was signed by Magistrate Judge Ronna Daly, and that was earlier this month. But then you have about 2 weeks ago a note that the plaintiff was directed to file the attached form regarding consenting or declining to consent of a magistrate's jurisdiction. The time for doing so is now past, and the court has not received the form. As required by the administrative code, Myers shall return a form within 7 days or face possible sanctions. So we'll have to follow up with Thomas Mag on that particular issue. But those are at least 3 different cases where there's been some movement on the docket in federal court. Again, to recap, no movement in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. Separate case, the challenge of Illinois' law allowing for lawsuits against the firearms industry. You had initially a Judge Beatty assigned, and then Stephen McGlynn, a judge, came in and took that case. And then now you've got the judge going back to Beatty, but they have to consent. So the plaintiffs and the defendants have to consent to that assignment. If they don't, it'll be randomly assigned. Then a separate case, the case Myers v. Kelly, challenging the FOID card, but also challenging the state's law that says you can only file suits in Cook or Sangamon County. That's now in federal court, so that doesn't necessarily apply to where this can be challenged. It's in the Southern District. And you have a second request for a delayed response. We'll see if the judge actually grants that, or if there's going to be some finality to this, or at least some movement so they can get the case going. But you also have the plaintiff in that case not filing within a time frame a consent form for the judge being assigned to the case. So a lot there, but hopefully, as we do every morning, we kind of review these things, and you are at least more informed as to what's going on with all of these different cases here in Illinois concerning gun litigation. All right, it is Springfield's Morning News. Definitely follow me if you want to stay up with more. It's real simple. Just search Bishop on Air on all the socials, and you'll find me, and we can connect that way. Got to take a